Please welcome Ivana Feldfeber, co-founder and executive director, DataGénero. Priyanka Jain, co-founder and chief executive officer, Evvy. Malika Saada Saar, senior fellow, human rights law and tech, Brown University. And moderator Nikhil Kumar, executive editor, Time.
So we don't have a lot of time, and as you heard, we have a very interesting panel, so I'm going to go straight to the questions. The first one that I have is something that touches on something that all of you do. All of you work at the intersection of justice and AI, whether it's gender equality, women's health more specifically, human rights more broadly. For the rest of us on the outside, there's often a conversation about building more inclusive technology systems, right? It's happened with previous innovations, it's happening with AI, and yet, to all of us on the outside, one thing that's very clear is that there is still a persistent gap. I wonder if you could just begin by telling us why you think that gap exists, what are the forces driving it right now when it comes to AI, and quickly, because again, we don't have a lot of time, how we might solve it. If I could start with you, Malika.
Sure. Well, look, I think we are in the fourth industrial revolution. And this can be an industrial revolution like the ones before, where empire building and exploitation and enslavement are expanded. Or this can be a moment where we choose a different type of industrial revolution, where we decide that it's not going to be about scale and speed and profit, that this moment is going to be about saying that we can bend this technology towards justice, that we can think about this technology as a tool that gives us an opportunity for equality and liberation. I think that in order to do that, in order to push for that type of industrial revolution, to push for that kind of a narrative of what AI will be, it's so critical that we are the ones to engage the technology. There's often a feeling of if we engage the technology, then we are complicit with its destruction. And I would urge us, those who are human rights defenders, those of us in civil society, that we must be the ones to be the stewards, the architects, the developers of AI. Exactly what we see happening today. Because if we don't figure out how we'll be the ones to harness this technology for our fundamental rights, for our democracy, then it will be weaponized against us, that it will belong to the abusers and the oligarchs. And I also come out of a deep faith that we know how to take this technology and make it ours. And I think about how, the tradition, the history of communities that have always been excluded is that we take that thing, whether it's in music or fashion, and we claim it as ours. It's what Basquiat did when he insisted in his paintings of Black and brown bodies that he paint crowns on those Black and brown bodies. It's what Virgil Abloh did when he decided that fashion would belong to the streets and not just the elites. I think it's important in this moment of deciding where the technology goes, who has it, who owns it, that we be able to say it's ours because as excluded communities, that's always what we have done. We have taken it, we have remixed it, we have re-engineered it, and made it for our place of dignity.
Priyanka?
Yeah, hard to follow that. I will come at it from a more specific lens, which, as you said, I work in women's health, and I think that for anyone here who is not a woman who has gone to the doctor, let me just tell you, it's not great. And specifically, I think, to answer your question, that so much of the gap that exists in medical technology, in AI, as it relates to specifically women or women's health, comes down to the obvious thing, which is what is the data that it is trained on, right? And in the US specifically, women weren't in clinical research until 1993. And to this day, with the technology and data that we have, women are on average diagnosed 4 years later than men across over 700 of the same diseases. And so what that tells you is that we fundamentally have a massive data gap when it comes to our understanding of what health and disease look like when the person you're talking about has a female body. And I think in my industry, as I look at the rapid rise of AI in healthcare and companies using data in EHRs or building longevity companies, as we were talking about before this, I'm very focused on, what are the overlooked markers that exist in the female body that we're ignoring, that we're not paying attention to, that we're not leveraging because we simply never studied women, right? And so I think for me, it goes back to how do you make sure that you're bringing the right data into the system so that the technology is actually useful for 100% of the population and not just the 49% that it's trained on.
Thank you. I resonate a lot with you, Malika and Priyanka. I work in Latin America with gender data gaps, so it's kind of everything mixed. For us, it's really important to address the infrastructure gap. Also in Latin America, we need better server infrastructure to think about AI. But we also are really creative in the ways that we tackle these issues, as Malika was saying. And I think there is a huge opportunity to fund communities, women, and people that want to create something specific for their communities, not this general AI that everyone is talking about, just specific AI that is transparent, that is local, that is distributed, open source. So that's what we are aiming to do, and I can tell you a little bit about it later.
So why don't we do that?
Okay. Great.
So one of the things that you are doing is that you're trying to flip the model. Like a lot of AI data generation right now, a lot of people see it as extractive. You're trying to do something new and something different. How are you going about it?
Yeah, we are tackling many issues. We are educating the population on the sensitivity of certain data, like health data and judicial data. We want to anonymize it to make it public, so it's safe for people to read it without re-identifying an individual. And we are also addressing the data gap using AI to create data sets on judicial rulings. So we take the rulings and we extract the information and we create data sets specifically to understand gender-based violence, for example, and some other issues to make it visible with data. And what we do that is kind of crazy is that we install this AI in the local judicial servers. So we have more than 30 distributed servers in Latin America in the judiciaries. So the data won't leave the premises and it's being produced there with the AI, it's being read by the AI there. So we don't have access to that information, we only have access to the data sets that are open and to the anonymized documents. So it's a lot of work from our end. We are a nonprofit and we have a lot of donations to build this up and to expand it to everywhere. But it's a lot of work for us, but it's really easy for the judicial officials to use it because it's really fast and it's really straightforward. You put a document, it reads it, extracts information and put it in a data set or redacts it. That's it. It's not an AI that will create a recipe for you also. It just does these really small things, it's a small model, and we think that this case can be expanded to other cases in Latin America. We don't need huge models with a lot of processing power to do simple tasks. So we are trying to do things different from Silicon Valley. We want to create a small open source AI, free for everyone, public, and to see what happens. It's like we are trying and seeing a lot of great results.
Well, given it's Climate Week, that would also have great implications for just energy use.
Yeah.
Priyanka, you run Evvy, and you touched on this already about the way in the medical sphere data has been collected, what drives innovations. You talked about longevity. Can you tell us a little bit about the genesis of this and the history of data gathering and how it's been very male-centric, and how what you're doing, focusing on the female body and coming up with innovations based on that information, what have you learned?
Wow, what a big question. I've learned a lot in the past 5 years of running Evvy. I think that the biases that brought us to where we are, I think I don't have to tell this audience. I think we all know men make decisions, men prioritize things that feel important to them. I think when you look at funding in women's health, and I will only be on this soapbox for like 30 seconds because I know we don't have a lot of time, but long story short is that in the US, 4% of our federal budget to study biology goes to specifically women. When you look at it on a venture landscape, so the world in which I operate, I think 3% of venture dollars that were invested in digital health went to women's health specific technologies. And when you look at it at a global level, when you look at biopharma, diagnostic, therapeutic development, it's 1%, right? So I just say that to say, like, we are not putting the dollars where women are, where our needs are. And so I think fundamentally we have just a massive misunderstanding, lack of understanding when it comes to, again, what health and disease look like in female bodies. I think in today's day and age, I don't have a lot of hope that the public sector is going to come in and save us here in the US. I think, what are they proposing? A 50% budget cut to the NIH? So that's not very promising. But I will say, I think what I am very excited about, and obviously I'm biased, is the role of patients in really changing the system. And I think, at Evvy, we work with over 75,000 women directly. We work with over 2,000 doctors now across the US. And guess what? The patients are the ones who are saying, this system isn't working for me, so I'm gonna go find something better. And when they find Evvy, they are then able to opt into leveraging their data to improve the research and improve the outcomes. And what we see is that 98% of our patients actively consent to their data being used for research. And I get emails all day, every day from women saying, what else can I tell you so that my daughter doesn't have to deal with this, so that my sister never has this problem? And I think what gives me hope is the fact that with the ability to reach people all around the world so quickly, we can actually be the ones to pool our own data, to fund the research that we believe in, because I personally am not going to sit here and wait for the government to do it.
Malika, you have worked with Google, YouTube to help embed human rights principles in what they do. I'm wondering, and you talked about this a little bit earlier, I'm wondering what you think needs to happen, like on a company by company level, that isn't happening right now. Is it possible for these new systems to be developed in a way that is inclusive for communities that have historically been left out of these conversations? And how do you do that? Like, is it even possible, I suppose? Let's begin there.
Well, actually, let me begin with the first part of the question, right? Which is, I started to see how the conversation around AI became a conversation around ethics, right? Ethics in AI. And it was surprising to me that it slanted in the direction of ethics as opposed to human rights. So why weren't we talking about human rights by design? Why weren't we talking about human rights principles? Because we have decades of jurisprudence on human rights. We have universal standards and norms around human rights. We have ways of contemplating our personhood, our individual fundamental rights that comes out of this history, right, of the UN Declaration of Human Rights and all the doctrine that followed and all of the entities built around those human rights doctrines. Why weren't we putting that into how we discussed the use, design, deployment of AI? So what I would argue is that the work has to be connecting those conversations on ethics to human rights and grounding product design in human rights and embracing AI governance in which the baseline is human rights. And that's not like rainbows and unicorns, right? Because, this is a history that we stand on in developing these doctrines where there is this agreement that has been earned over decades. And I think it's especially critical to come back to that type of human rights framework and grounding in this moment where we're understanding power differently because of the technology. Part of the reason why I was drawn to human rights law is because it's premised in the idea that the government doesn't give you power or rights or freedom. A piece of paper, a constitution, doesn't do that for you. That by virtue of being an individual, you have inherent rights and dignity. Mm-hmm. And that came out of World War II, right? That came out of an era where a government, a state, put its people into ovens. The importance of pushing back against power to say that there are the rights, the fundamental inherent freedoms of the individual. And when we're looking now at this new architecture of power, I think it's so important to dig into that notion of our inherent dignity, our humanity, and center that in the way that we discuss how do we govern AI, how do we decide product design.
We have just about a minute left. We're, of course, all here for UNGA. There's all kinds of big macro topics being discussed. If I could ask each one of you, perhaps starting with you, Ivana, if there's one thing that you wish was being discussed at the top tables that isn't, that would center some of these conversations around AI and justice, what would it be?
That's a great question. I think that it should be stated that things can be done differently, and there are a lot of places that are doing so, and show that, because we are only getting one side of AI and it's this big hype. We should clear the smoke and the snake oil and see what is really there.
Priyanka?
I mean, hopefully nobody is surprised by my answer, but I think we should fund women's health research, and we should think about the differences in data that exist when we're talking about these models.
And Malika?
I think to center these examples of real examples, not the smoke and the snake oil, but these real examples that we see today and in our communities around how people are really leveraging AI towards justice and the concrete outcomes of that, and being able to recognize that we can harness this technology in a way that can be on our terms, and that should be centered in these conversations at UNGA.
Which is a great note of hope. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.